Housework is your job as the daughter-in-law, isn't it? Why do I have to clean? Don't get spoiled just because we live together. You're shameless. I can't believe it.
I need you to vacuum. That's the reaction I got when I asked for help. Actually, I injured my leg falling down the stairs recently. I can't do household chores and childcare properly anymore. My mother-in-law said she would help me. So, I took her up on her offer and we started living together recently. That's when the strain on my leg increased. I asked my mother-in-law to vacuum for me, but she refused with a very clear frown on her face. But it hasn't fully healed yet. I hope you could help a little, Mom.
You say it's not fully healed, but you can move just fine now. It's not like you can't do it. It's because you keep depending on others that your recovery is slow. Saying that, my mother-in-law refused to help. I sighed and thought I would just do it myself. Sighing so conspicuously, you're quite a disrespectful daughter-in-law. Didn't I take care of you a lot when you were injured? You forget the favors people do for you as soon as you feel a little better. My mother-in-law said this with a self-righteous tone. She used to be so kind before we started living together, but as soon as we started living together, she stopped helping with anything. She even started making sarcastic remarks. I never knew she could be like this. I felt disheartened, but slowly began to vacuum the whole house. My mother-in-law shouted, "It's so noisy," at me several times, but I pretended not to hear. My irritated mother-in-law eventually left the house to go somewhere. My mother-in-law returned around dinner time. My husband and daughter were also at the dining table. She came back with both hands full, looking satisfied. Let's eat this instead of such a simple meal.
When I looked inside the bag that my mother-in-law placed on the table, I found steak, caviar, and even foie gras. These are all high-quality ingredients, aren't they? What's going on here? When I asked, my mother-in-law smiled mischievously and began,
"Well, you see..."
I turned pale upon hearing what she started to say. My name is Eleanor, and I'm a full-time housewife. I live with my husband Jack and our preschooler daughter Mia, and we're known as a friendly and close-knit family in the neighborhood. I met my husband at a company-sponsored social event several years ago. Since he had a demanding job, I decided to quit my job and take care of the household and childcare. One day, I injured myself falling down the stairs, and my leg is in pain, making it difficult to manage childcare and housework as I'd like. Jack, can't you take a break from work?
I'm currently swamped, and I can't afford to take days off.
My family lives far away, so it's not easy for them to come and help. That's why I asked my mother-in-law, who occasionally visits us because she lives nearby, to come and assist.
Eleanor, are you alright? You had quite a serious injury, didn't you? It must have been painful.
My mother-in-law was very concerned about my injuries. I'm sorry, Mom. Thank you for your help.
It's alright. Leave it to me. Let Mia play with her grandmother. Then I'll go grocery shopping and prepare dinner.
My mother-in-law, who had come to our rescue, took over for me since I couldn't move. She took care of our daughter, prepared meals, and even cleaned the house. Having my mother-in-law here was a tremendous help. I had grown quite comfortable with her presence. So when my husband proposed the idea of living together, I agreed, without hesitation. Our house was a single-family residence, and we had plenty of room. I thought her being here would make household chores and childcare much easier. I had no idea how wrong I was. Once my mother-in-law and I decided to move in together, it didn't take long. My husband's family had been renting their previous place, so they vacated it swiftly, and my mother-in-law moved in right away. In the beginning, when we started living together, things seemed to be going smoothly. However,
household chores are your responsibility as the daughter-in-law, aren't they? Why do I have to do the cleaning? Just because we live together, don't get too comfortable. It's really quite audacious, and that's just not acceptable.
Since my leg hadn't fully healed, I asked my mother-in-law to vacuum for me, but she openly refused, making a displeased face. I couldn't help but feel exasperated. But I'm still not completely healed. Mom, can you please help a little?
Even if you say you're not completely healed, you can move just fine now. It's not like you can't do it. It's because you keep depending on others, like this, that your recovery is slow.
Saying that, my mother-in-law refused to help. When we had just started living together, she used to assist with household chores, but even that became sporadic. Recently, she hardly did anything at all. As for my husband, ever since we moved in together, he's grown quite dependent on his parents and seems to have reverted to a more childlike state. No matter what I said, I couldn't get through to my mother-in-law, as my husband always took her side. I asked my mother-in-law to at least clean up the areas she had made a mess in, but she wouldn't listen. Unable to do anything else, I would let out a sigh and continue to handle all the household chores by myself, as I always did. This seemed to irritate my mother-in-law even more.
Sighing so conspicuously, you're quite a disrespectful daughter-in-law. Didn't I take care of you a lot when you were injured? You forget the favors people do for you as soon as you feel a little better.
My mother-in-law was known for her habit of acting superior and playing up her past kindness. But ever since we started living together, she stopped helping with anything. She started making sarcastic remarks, and I couldn't believe what kind of person she had become. I felt disheartened, but slowly began to vacuum the whole house. My mother-in-law shouted,
"It's so noisy!"
at me several times, but I pretended not to hear. My irritated mother-in-law eventually left the house to go somewhere. My mother-in-law returned around dinner time. My husband and daughter were also at the dining table. She came back with both hands full, looking satisfied.
"Let's eat this instead of such a simple meal."
When I looked inside the bag that my mother-in-law placed on the table, I found steak, caviar, and even foie gras. These are all high-quality ingredients, aren't they? What's going on here? When I asked that, my mother-in-law smiled mischievously and began.
"Well, you see..."
My mother-in-law, who had gotten angry with me for vacuuming loudly, had gone to a famous restaurant in her car and purchased these items for takeout, she explained.
"Because both Jack and Mia are always eating such frugal meals, aren't they? Don't you want to give them something good to eat once in a while?"
That's my mom for you. Experienced homemakers have a different perspective. Let's dig in right away.
I interrupted my enthusiastic husband and asked my mother-in-law, "How did you afford this? You're on a pension, so you shouldn't have the means, right?"
"Well, that's right. So I used the money I found in that shelf over there."
I looked at the spot where my mother-in-law pointed and felt a sense of dread. I hurriedly opened the shelf and checked the envelope inside, but there wasn't a single dollar left. "Mom, this is our food budget for this month. Using it without permission is like stealing."
"Putting money in such a conspicuous place is the wrong thing to do, you know. It's your fault, Eleanor, isn't it?"
She tried to shift the blame onto me, and my husband sided with her, claiming it was because of my lax management. No matter how much I protested, they wouldn't listen, and I ended up paying for the remaining food expenses this month. Then one morning, I woke up to find my daughter wetting the bed.
I'm sorry.
Oh, that's unusual. Don't worry, it'll be fine after we wash it. My daughter had finished her toilet training, and she would wake us up when she needed to use the bathroom at night. So I found it unusual. I thought that occasional bedwetting was normal for her age, but my mother-in-law and husband scolded her for it.
Mia, what are you doing? Bedwetting is such a shameful thing.
Oh no, Mia's pajamas and sheets are all wet. Don't come near, it smells.
Mia was left in tears by their cold words. It was such a cruel thing to say to young Mia. Such comments about the smell were definitely not something a father should say. I comforted our crying daughter, but my mother-in-law interjected.
Spoiling her like this from a young age isn't good.
Despite her words, Mia's bedwetting issue persisted. She continued wetting her bedding multiple times. I wondered if there might be an illness. I became anxious and took her to several hospitals, but there was no sign of illness, and the cause remained unknown. It's strange because she doesn't wet the bed or have accidents at kindergarten. I thought maybe I should consult with her teacher next time. As I was contemplating this, the teacher called me in the following day, saying something seemed off with our daughter, and that it would be best if I came in to discuss it. Mia, what's wrong? With a face on the verge of tears, our daughter looked at the teacher and, prompted by her, began to speak hesitantly.
Mom, you see, it's about Grandma.
In summary, her simple words conveyed the following story. Before we started living together, my mother-in-law had come over to visit while I was out. During that time, my husband and my mother-in-law were discussing proposing the idea of us all living together. She happened to overhear their conversation from the top of the stairs. I had indeed fallen and gotten injured while coming down the stairs, and the cause was that the mat on the stairs had been changed to one with longer fibers, making it more slippery. I see. Mia's bedwetting was rooted in the anxiety she felt after hearing about that plan. Why didn't you tell Mom right away? Mia, while crying, replied,
Because if I told Mom, she would suffer more. Grandma told me not to say anything when she found out.
Upon hearing that my daughter had been threatened by my mother-in-law, I trembled with anger and held my crying daughter tightly. It was tough for you, wasn't it? You don't have to worry anymore. Mom won't give up, okay? I comforted her like that. I couldn't forgive Mia being threatened and even causing me harm. I guess they intended to take advantage of me when we started living together, but I won't let that happen. Just watch, I'll give it back double. From then on, I squeezed in some exercise between household chores, and my body gradually improved after my injury healed. My mother-in-law continued to do nothing, but because she kept pushing housework onto me, I could somewhat move at my own pace, which made it easier to find time. I also set up recording devices throughout the house that I had bought at an electronics store. Around that time, my husband was coming home late frequently, and my mother-in-law often claimed she was going shopping. So it was easy to set up the devices. Unaware of these actions, my mother-in-law continued to exploit me. Then one day, she asked me to make a reservation at a popular restaurant and said she and my husband were going there alone. My husband and mother-in-law went to that restaurant all as planned. I seized the opportunity. I contacted someone to take care of my daughter temporarily during the weekend. And then...
This restaurant is delicious, isn't it? I'm so lucky to be here with my kind son.
I'm just being a dutiful son, right? It's not easy to get a reservation here, you know. The room is spacious and Eleanor comes in handy once in a while.
As the two of them were enjoying their course meal in a private room, suddenly the door swung open and a couple appeared. Upon seeing these individuals, my husband's eyes widened and he became flustered.
Mr. Davis, why are you here? It's been a while, Jack. Mr. Davis, are you sure you're not in the wrong room?
It's not a mistake, I interjected from behind, and behind me a middle-aged woman with a lawyer's badge followed.
Eleanor, what's going on?
Today, Mr. and Mrs. Davis are here with their lawyer, so I reserved a private room for 6. My matter-of-fact statement seemed entirely natural. Both my husband and mother-in-law appeared bewildered, glancing around in confusion. Mr. Davis was a senior colleague at my husband's company and had even organized the mixer when my husband and I first met.
Why would you do such a thing?
Because you were cheating with Mr. Davis's wife, Chloe. His senior colleague's wife, Chloe, standing beside her husband, turned pale and looked like she might faint at any moment. My husband also quickly changed his complexion. The other day, in order to confirm my daughter's story, I set up recording devices throughout the house. It became clear that my husband had been making secret phone calls there repeatedly, addressing someone as Chloe in a friendly manner. I had heard that name before, but it turned out to be his senior colleague's wife. I remembered it because I attended his senior colleague's wedding last year with my husband. I took the senior colleague's contact information from my husband's phone and contacted him to confess about the affair. It appears that his senior colleague also suspected his wife of having an affair, so we decided to work together.
It's a misunderstanding. I wasn't really having an affair.
Oh, there's no need for excuses. We already have testimony from the wife. Upon hearing this, my husband was taken aback, saying, His eyes widened, and he was left speechless. Truth be told, the day before I had called his senior colleague's wife to meet. Initially, she feigned ignorance, but when I advised, you should just be honest, you know there's compensation and everything, right? When I hinted at reducing the compensation, she opened up and talked freely. She and my husband were colleagues from work, and their relationship turned this way while they were discussing their married lives. When I boldly stated I had evidence through recordings and testimonies, my husband knelt down and begged his senior colleague for forgiveness.
I'm very sorry. I'm sorry, but I can't forgive you. I've already sent a registered letter to the company, so be prepared for the consequences from HR.
The senior colleague coldly pushed away my husband. Jack, we're getting a divorce, and I'll be sure to get alimony and child support. When the lawyer conveyed the amounts, my husband seemed desperate and clung to me.
Eleanor, I'm begging you. I'll kick my mother out and we can start over again.
Enough with the jokes. I've already recorded your verbal abuse towards me, so I can claim compensation. Above all, I can't imagine starting over with someone who threatens my daughter. I stated it firmly. Also on the recorder, I also have evidence of your mom's theft. When my mother-in-law heard this, she trembled noticeably. Perhaps she had something to hide, so she kept silent for a long time. But I won't let her off the hook either. Not only did you steal money from the house, but you also sold the boat model that Jack cherished so much on a flea market app, didn't you? You must have been spending recklessly with that money. When I mentioned this, it seemed like my husband didn't know about it. He became furious with his mom. His mother yelled,
Spending money on such junk! You shouldn't have cheated in the first place.
But my husband also.
Mom, you must have known about the affair too. Don't criticize me while ignoring your own actions.
And so a parent-child argument began. My mother-in-law was about to grab my husband by the collar, but the lawyer I had on standby calmly called the police. Afterward, his senior colleague and I, with our respective lawyers in between, successfully finalized our divorces. I received a substantial amount of compensation from the senior colleague's wife. She has suggested reducing the amount, but I never hinted at accepting any reduction. Rumors of my ex-husband's infidelity spread at his workplace, but because he had to make payments for compensation and child support, he couldn't quit. Since my ex-husband's company dealt with products for women, it seemed he had made many female colleagues his enemies. As a result, he was often assigned warehouse duties instead of sales positions. One day, my ex-husband was hiding and smoking inside the warehouse. The supervisor called out to check if anyone was there, but my ex-husband, who didn't want to get caught, stayed silent and ended up being locked inside the warehouse for the day. No matter how much he pounded, the soundproofing prevented his cries from being heard. Locked in a place with no water supply or anything else, my ex-husband was found by the security guard who came for the night patrol 6 hours later. Rumor has it he accidentally wet himself. With the gossip spreading, my ex-husband understandably resigned from the company. Now he's apparently working multiple part-time jobs and living with his mom. By the way, his senior colleague's ex-wife, her parents paid the compensation all at once for her, and now she's being made to do manual labor in a company run by relatives. Once she tried to escape and roll back to her ex-husband's place, but her compatibility with her former mother-in-law was terrible. They were arguing loudly, and the police warned them. In the end, she was taken back to her parents' house. Honestly, even hearing such a story, I couldn't muster any sympathy. I couldn't help but think, you reap what you sow. As for me, I used the qualifications I obtained before marriage and found a new job. Fortunately, once my daughter separated from my ex-husband and ex-mother-in-law, her bedwetting quickly improved. It seems she made new friends right away at the new nursery. She would even take a friend who had an accident to the bathroom and get them a pair of underwear from the changing shelf. There are times when she gently supports them, as the teacher told me. I felt happy sensing my daughter's kindness and resilience. She has overcome difficult times. I am proud to have a daughter who is kind to others.